Tonight, an African proposal in the spotlight to diffuse Russia-Ukraine's ongoing conflict, and the US Department of Homeland Security's disregard for President Joe Biden's order to report use of force incidents. Later in the show, we revisit an interview about a photography exhibition that aims to help Muslim women cope with Islamophobia.
I never expected it to be as successful as it ended up being, but it was honestly just a way to kind of, get back to baseline and relax.
Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Muslim News Canada on Muslim Network TV. I am Catherine Bullock. Russian President Vladimir Putin has commented on a proposal from African leaders for peace in Moscow's war on Ukraine. The news comes after Putin's meeting with African leaders in St. Petersburg. Putin says the African initiative could serve as a foundation for certain processes towards a peaceful resolution. He calls it similar to China's initiative. However, he mentioned that implementing certain aspects of the proposal, such as a ceasefire, is impossible due to ongoing attacks from Kyiv. The African proposal includes steps to defuse the conflict, like a Russian troop pullback, removal of Russian tactical nuclear weapons from Belarus, suspension of an international criminal court arrest warrant against Putin, and sanctions relief. However, all the details of the plan have not been publicly disclosed. Pakistan police on Monday combed through the wreckage of a suicide blast that killed at least 44 people at an Islamist party's political gathering ahead of elections due later this year. Around 400 members of the Jamiat Ulama-Islam F party were waiting for speeches to begin when the attacker detonated his vest near the front stage. This party is led by a cleric and is a key government coalition partner. The attack occurred in the town of Khar in the northwestern Bajor district, just 45 kilometers from the Afghan border. This is an area where militancy has been rising since the Taliban took control of Kabul in 2021. Pakistan's parliament is likely to be dissolved after it completes its term in the next 2 weeks, with national elections to be held by mid-November or earlier. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the Pakistani Taliban, who operate in the area, have denied being behind it. The local chapter of the jihadist Islamic State group have in the past targeted Jamiat Ulama-Islam F party rallies and leaders. They have not yet commented on the attack. Analysts say militants in the former tribal areas have become emboldened since the return of the Afghan Taliban. The blast coincides with a visit to the country by a senior delegation of Chinese officials, including Vice Premier He Lifeng, who arrived in the capital Sunday evening. A recent report by the US Government Accountability Office reveals that the Department of Homeland Security largely disregarded President Joe Biden's order to the federal law enforcement agencies to update their use of force policies. The order came after there were global protests against police brutality sparked by the murder of George Floyd. The report by the Accountability Office released last week highlights that the Department of Homeland Security failed to accurately compile data on use of force incidents. The Watchdog Office stated that the data were unreliable for describing the frequency of their officers' use of force. In February, the Department of Homeland Security revised its use of force policy to restrict no-knock entries, mandate more frequent training, and ban chokeholds, except in cases where deadly force is authorized. These changes were in line with President Joe Biden's executive order from May last year, which required federal law enforcement agencies to align their use of force practices with the new Department of Justice policy. The executive order also emphasized the need for better data collection and reporting on the use of force by federal agencies. The report by the Accountability Office, authorized by Congress the previous year, found that several agencies under Homeland Security consistently undercounted use of force incidents. For instance, if officers used force multiple times during a single event, the agency counted it as only one use of force incident. This resulted in an inaccurate representation of the actual frequency of use of force situations. The report makes two recommendations to the Department of Homeland Security. One is to resolve issues regarding reporting incidents on multiple uses of force. The other is to implement a plan and timeline to analyze use of force data. The US Government Accountability Office will receive updates in the next 6 months. For more on how photography helps cope with Islamophobia, stay tuned. High school mental health professional by day, photographer by night and by weekend, I guess. We have with us today Faiza Omar, who has done a project with the CBC, reclaiming public space with photographs of Muslim women. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam, and thank you for having me today.
It's our pleasure. The website called Reclaiming Public Space has photographs of Muslim women from Edmonton, and you projected behind them a image of certain public spaces in Edmonton. Can you share with us why you decided to do those projections?
So the main sentiment behind this project was to kind of show that these public spaces that used to be safe public spaces for us, such as parking lots, the mall, train stations, were taken away from us. And the idea to project these images of where Black Muslim women were attacked was to kind of showcase that, you know, we are trying to take these spaces back. We want to, you know, make these spaces places that we are comfortable visiting again. So that's kind of the idea, to kind of, you know, put into a perspective as well how public these spaces are. And they might be safe for other Edmontonians, but they don't feel safe for us.
Perhaps people haven't been following what's been going on. Can you share with us what's happened in these public spaces?
Yes, so I think sometime during the pandemic, there is an alarming rise of attacks in Edmonton and other places in Canada as well against Muslim women. What's particularly alarming is that it's specifically Black Muslim women that are being attacked at a higher rate than other Muslim women as well. And these attacks are, you know, in broad daylight. In public spaces. So that's something that's still continuing on for around 2 years now.
And do you have a sense why it might be Black Muslim women as distinct from other Muslim women who are being targeted?
I think, you know, the main thing that comes to mind is, you know, that anti-Blackness, racism that comes together with Islamophobia. So it's like these two prejudices are coming at an intersection. And I think that's kind of what's happening here.
How did a freelance photographer make a connection to the CBC to mount a photographic exhibition?
Honestly, they contacted me, which I was very surprised about. I've been highlighted by the CBC twice before this. They've seen my work. But it was for the Black in the Prairies project, and they wanted to definitely highlight what was going on in Edmonton.
Let's talk a little bit about the craft. You are a mental health professional by day, and I'm sure that that's a very draining and taxing job, and you did lots of study to get there. So how did you end up with the photography as a side hustle?
Yeah. So I did neuroscience and mental health, as well as neuroscience, a master's in neuroscience, and I did another master's in counseling psychology. So that was like 9 years of school, and I definitely needed something for self-care, a hobby, and that's where photography came in. I never expected it to be as successful as it ended up being, but it was honestly just a way to kind of, get back to baseline and relax. Something that I just do in my home and, just share on Instagram and my social media. But yeah, definitely. It's been great.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems that you've sort of come full circle. The photography is not relaxing in the home now. You're doing photography about trauma and coping with attacks. And so are you sort of bringing those two parts of you together with this project?
Yes, definitely. So I've done a few social photo voice projects. This was my third one. And I use my mental health skills to ask really difficult questions where the participant or the model that I'm speaking to has to be re-triggered while speaking about whatever they went through. So I have those skills, those mental health skills, to kind of navigate and see the way they're reacting, and listening to any cues that tell me that maybe I shouldn't be asking this question, maybe I should go this way, maybe there's something here. So definitely I am a mental health counselor while I'm taking photos.
And yet you have photographs, the women are smiling and laughing and looking very beautiful and warm. So did you also capture moments of crying and weed them out, or how did you sort of get models in that poses?
Yeah, so we did two different shoots in this project. We did the one where they're being projected with these areas where people, Muslim women, were attacked. We also did these black and white photos where I want to capture that we are resilient, we are survivors, we are joyful, we're still thriving. And I chose black and white to kind of, focus on their expressions, and I didn't want any kind of distractions in the photo. So that's kind of why I chose to do black and white. But yeah, I have that skill as well to kind of get people to open up. And definitely there was a lot of laughter in the studio, as well as tears and, that feeling of anger. I don't like to capture tears. I feel that moment they're very vulnerable, and I wouldn't want those images, being put out for me. So I try to just kind of capture specific emotions, but not the tears per se. But honestly, I hope it does come across that Muslim women are, very strong, and we're still living, we're still thriving.
So I wanted to ask you about the black and white. It seems an unusual choice in these days of color. And you mentioned, I think, in the website that you wanted to use shadows in order to convey a message. What is it about black and white for you that helps portray resilience?
Yes, so the idea of using black and white was to kind of remove any distractions. I love color. I love the use of color when I'm taking photos. I love to implement color in some ways, but I think in this particular case, I wanted their emotions to outweigh anything else. And I think shadow play is a very great way to kind of do that. So what I did with my lighting technique, I used one light on the side to kind of create those shadows as well, and to kind of emphasize any grooves in the face, or any poses that they're doing. So that's kind of the idea behind why I chose to do that.
I was involved in a photo voice project for Muslim youth a few years ago, and it was aimed to help them, express their life and their difficulties. We actually had difficulty signing people up because there's a sizable portion of people in the Muslim community here who think photography is not permitted. So do you have any comments on that, and how did you get your people to sign up?
Yes. So even in my own family, when I first started out, my parents were too happy that I even owned a camera. Um, but over time, I think the importance of amplifying our voices kind of outweighs that, in my own opinion. Because we're in an age where images are the most powerful way of conveying messages right now. So we're in that social media age. And I do believe there's a great benefit in sharing these stories and getting people who are not part of our community to kind of humanize us and understand the tough times that we're going through.
We're almost out of time, but can you share with us quickly a memorable moment or a feedback that you've gotten from somebody?
About this project?
Yes.
Yes, so one of the participants was in high school. She actually is from the high school that I work at, and she was saying that her everyday day to life had drastically changed as a result to all these attacks. You know, she said she doesn't even feel safe going to the mall with her friends, and she usually has to hold a friend's hand or whatnot. So I thought that was very jarring, and I wanted to kind of push that message that these attacks are still happening. I think the most recent one was in January in Edmonton, and Islamophobia is big and real, anti-blackness as well. So definitely, if you're watching this, if you're ever in a space where someone's being attacked, pull out your camera. I'm not telling you to jump into the fight or whatever, but pull out your camera, maybe record what's going on, or stay behind and leave a witness statement with the police.
And unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you for sharing with us this beautiful project.
Thank you for having me and letting me speak. Thank you.
That's it from Canadian Muslim News. We hope you enjoyed the show. Stay safe. Stay tuned for the next episode. God bless.